And welcome to Faith Nation. You know, if you've been following the news, you've probably heard the name Roy Moore, the horse riding, gun-slinging former judge, had hopes of making his way here to Washington as a senator from Alabama.
Yeah, that's right, but he couldn't do it. Democrat Doug Jones, he pulled away with a win last night in the special election in Alabama. That, of course, means he'll be coming here to Capitol Hill to represent the people of his state. Well, that's right, Jenna, and today we're bringing you a special show on Capitol Hill. Obviously, Jenna there, and we're going to be looking at yesterday's election. Recent resignations. We're also going to be bringing you a story about how God is moving among lawmakers on the Hill. So make sure you got to share on the Facebook page right there. You know the deal. Just find the word share. It's there for sure. But first, who is Doug Jones exactly? Well, look, he's a former U.S. attorney. He's never run for public office before, but when it comes to the issues, he is lockstep with the Democrats. Yeah, he's pro-LGBT rights, he's pro-abortion, but you know, David, he really made this race about one thing, and that was Roy Moore and character.
We have come so far, and the people of Alabama have spoken. I have said from the very beginning, this campaign has never been about me. It's never been about Roy Moore. It has been about every one of you and your sons and daughters.
You know, Jenna, even though Jones has been declared the winner, Roy Moore really has yet to concede.
Yeah, he does. And you know, Roy Moore was telling his supporters that they really need to rely on their faith at this point.
We also know that God is always in control. You know, part of the problem with this campaign is we've been painted in an unfavorable and unfaithful light. We've been put in a hole, if you will, and it reminds me of a passage in Psalm 40. I waited patiently for the Lord. And that's what we've got to do, is wait on God. It's not over, and it's going to take some time.
And, you know, I think the real warning here, David, is the enthusiasm that's on the Democrats' side. You know, they just had a win in New Jersey, they had a win in Virginia, and now this. And so for Republicans, they need to turn out Trump's populist base. And if they can't do that, the midterms look a little gloomy for them. I don't know. What's your take?
I agree exactly with what you're saying on the momentum, Jenna, for sure. And I would also add a couple of things that we're seeing from the exit polls. You know, evangelicals typically, 47% or so of evangelicals make up the voting electorate in Alabama. This time around, though, it was 44%, down 3%. And clearly, Roy Moore needed all the help he could get from evangelicals. It did not happen. They went down 3%. That's very important. We should also point out that you've heard this figure, 81% of evangelicals voted for Roy Moore. Let's be clear on what we're saying there. 81% of evangelicals who showed up to vote voted for Roy Moore, not 81% of all evangelicals in the state. I would also point out this, Jenna, and I think this is very important, and this is the problem for Republicans going forward. White women in the suburbs. Roy Moore won 63% of those. Doug Jones, only 30%. Now, a lot of folks will look at that and go, wow, he did. I can't believe all those white women voted for Roy Moore. Hold on for a moment. Normally, the Republican U.S. Senate candidate from Alabama gets about 80% of white women, not 63%. So Roy Moore had some real problems in that area, and I think that's going to be some problems to come for him. So we'll have to wait and see on that, Jenna.
We'll have to wait and see.
All right. Well, we'll check back with you a little later. I know you got a few things come up. All right. Grab a hot dog
David.
or something. I don't know. Speaking about hot dogs, we've got a couple of here. No, just kidding. You like the transition?
No, not at all.
I guess that's right. You wouldn't like that decision. All right. Amber C. Strong, Ben, I don't know what your initial is. Kennedy is here. I don't know if you have a middle initial.
John.
Ben John Kennedy, BJK.
BJK.
I love that. Anyhow, social. What do you guys got going?
So you guys are definitely weighing in. You guys are impassioned about this subject. But the first tweet we're going to show you today, or the first comment we're going to show you today, you may recognize him. It's from President Donald Trump. He had some things to say about this morning. He tweeted, "The reason I originally endorsed Luther Strange, and his numbers went up mightily,
of course he's
is that I said Roy Moore will not be able to win the general election. I was right. Roy worked hard, but the deck was stacked against him." And then some of you guys have been weighing in since last night, really, since those election results started rolling in. This one from Vineyard says, "It is what it is. Next year is midterm elections. There will be another chance to put a Republican in office. Be patient, folks. It will work out. by the fact that Jones won takes away the Democrats' ammunition. So that's a thought there. And this one from Anna. God raises kings and takes them down. Jones will be held accountable to God for every decision he makes. I want to go back to Vineyard's comment about Democrats' ammunition, because this is something we saw a lot from Senate Republicans who were terrified of a Roy Moore win. They were terrified because they knew that a Roy Moore win could be loads of ammunition in the midterm elections.
Right. I think the guy, I don't know what your take on this, Ben, is, but I got to tell you, Mitch McConnell has got to be breathing a huge sigh of relief right now. I mean, I know he's got a 50, he had 52 votes in the Senate. Now he'll have 51. But the way I see it, guys, he'll take 51 any day of the week rather than having Roy Moore up there in D.C. I mean, that was going to be something that the media wouldn't have let go of, and the Republican Party knew they would have to deal with this for a long time.
And David, I think that's one of the takeaways. They still have the majority despite this loss. And people are talking about on social, I want to give some shout outs to you guys at home. Steve Johnson said, look, these allegations against Roy Moore, you bet they hurt. Shay added that Moore should have got it, so clearly she was hoping that he would win this election. But Oscar made a good point here. God is in control. And that's the big takeaway that we've been talking about in the AM is, look, everything has a will. It is in his plan. And Oscar Laureano that was his comment.
Yeah. I will say, I don't know if you see anything else there for now, but do you have any?
I thought one was.
You always have something.
One was interesting to me. He said that the Democrats could have, with all the allegations against Roy Moore, the Democrats could have nominated a bag of popcorn, and Roy Moore would have lost. I'm just reading the comments, folks. So that was one of the, because of all of the, as President Trump said, the cards that were stacked against him, but because of the accusations that were out against him. It hurt him in the end.
I like how you passed the attribution.
Back to the president.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And David, real quick, Anna Mozingo was listening to what you were saying earlier. She said 3% of evangelicals let us down. To kind of piggyback off the evangelical vote just not being there.
Well, and it does make you wonder, and once again, we know evangelicals vote on the issues, and that's why many of them showed up to vote for Roy Moore. They weren't necessarily saying, we love you, Roy. They were saying, we want a pro-life, candidate. But you're right, there were many evangelicals, 3%, that didn't do that, and you wonder if they're not, they maybe weren't looking so much in the macro in the future, because this could come back very much to bite Trump and the Republicans later on. I would say the good news for folks like, is it Anna? Anna? I think it was Anna. I will just say this, is that in 3 years, Doug Jones is going to be up for re-election. Yeah. And, the sense is in deep ruby state, or ruby red, Alabama, there'll probably be a different outcome, you would think, but we'll see.
25 years, it's been Republican. This is the first Democrat in 2 decades.
Fascinating, yeah. Did you want to say something?
An interesting comment from Charles. He says, Roy Moore didn't campaign last week, no enthusiasm. And this is some of the things that we saw coming out in the 2016 election against Hillary Clinton, that just kind of running really hard, and then we get to the end and we don't see you. The people need to see you. So we've thrown out about, 60 scenarios in the last 10 minutes about what was the ultimate undoing for Roy Moore. And that, I think, Charles, you're right, could be another element to it.
Well, I know Jen is standing by with a guest, but just real quick before I get to that, I do want to say that Roy Moore did disappear from the campaign trail in the last week. I mean, that's not how to run a race, and that he had a disastrous interview with Sean Hannity where, the reality is that he didn't convince anybody that these allegations were untrue. I mean, he just didn't do a very good job of communicating that. And so I think there were some missteps clearly on his part. Let's head to Jenna, because she is with Louie Gohmert, who has campaigned by his side, Roy Moore's side, for the better part of this campaign. And I'm sure he has a few things to say. Let's have a look.
Well, Representative Louie Gohmert from Texas joins me now. Congressman, thanks so much for being here.
Great to be with you.
What is your takeaway from last night's Alabama Senate race and Roy Moore's loss?
Well, having known Roy for many years, going back to the days in the 90s when he was a judge and I was a judge, my heart just breaks for him. Now, I would imagine there will probably be a recount, and there's always some improprieties in virtually every election. Sometimes it's very, very small. But in this, what, in my opinion, we saw were improprieties that were of the official kind by people who should have known better, who, and I just think about all the times in the Bible where a king would say, well, I'm going to judge you by the standards by which you judge this other person. And of course, you know, Jesus used stories similar to that. But we now have some U.S. senators who have made clear that if a female makes an allegation, no matter how old, no matter how outrageous, we have to accept that and consider you to be a pervert or a child molester. So that's going to be a tough standard.
Yeah, let me ask you, a lot of political pundits will say the Republican Party is in serious trouble for 2018.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
I'd say we could be, but I've been saying that all this year. Some people have been saying, well, there's no way the Senate could lose the majority. And it's very, very doubtful the House could. And I've been saying all year, look, we promised we would repeal Obamacare and get people back the insurance they like, the doctors they like, the medicine they like, make health care more affordable and get rid of Obamacare to do that. We promised we'd do that. I think everybody, Republican I know of in the House, maybe everybody Republican in the Senate, but Susan Collins promised to do that. And then you had people get in there and break their word, broke their promises to their people. And I think some of the senators had the idea, well, we can't lose the majority, so I'm not worried about it. And I've been saying all along, you can lose the majority in the Senate. Now we have a chance for tax reform. Hopefully we're going to vote on that, and not just tax reform, tax cuts to the middle class. In the House, the only tax rate we didn't cut was the top level, and I thought we should have done across the board and go to a flat tax. But the reason some of our guys want to play politics. They said, no, if we leave that top rate at the high level where it is, then nobody can say we're out to help millionaires at the expense. Well, they're saying that anyway, even though we left. So hopefully we're going to get a bill done, but we are at real risk of losing the majority in both houses. And if we lose the majority in both houses, then President Trump will be impeached, and decent chance he would be removed from office. The first person to be impeached for something that really would not have been considered in our history any type of impeachable offense. So there's a real risk here. I have felt for some time that this last year's election and these next couple will tell us whether Christians get to be practicing our religion with a freedom of religion, the basis for this country.
Representative Louie Gohmert, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenna. So with all the news of sexual harassment claims on Capitol Hill, there has been a lot of talk about ethics committees and ethics committees investigations. But what is the ethics committee exactly, and what power do they hold? We decided to take a look. Here you go. There are two committees, one on the House side and one on the Senate side. The House committee is bipartisan and made up of 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans. The committees are in charge of making sure their fellow members of Congress follow the rules. What are the rules exactly? The Ethics Committee lays down the guidelines on everything from campaign contributions, how to interact with lobbyists, to the way congressmen and women treat their staffs. They investigate accusations of wrongdoing and make recommendations for further action. Those recommendations can include censure and even expulsion, but it's up to the House or the Senate to decide the final punishment.
Some of the things that are coming out in the media are just awful and not entirely true.
Lately, they've been busy. Right now, the House committee is opening a new investigation into Congressman Blake Farenthold. A 2015 investigation against the congressman was dropped when he reportedly used $84,000 of taxpayer money to settle a sexual harassment and discrimination accusation. Now there's a new investigation subcommittee looking into the matter, as both the accuser and Farenhold say they want, quote, increased transparency. Farenhold maintains his innocence. The ethics committees are often scrutinized themselves. Many times, those under investigation are cleared, or the cases are dismissed, leaving the question, can congressional members really investigate themselves? That's part of the scrutiny behind it, is there's so many dismissals in these ethics committees, and so the question is, can they really investigate each other and give each other a fair or even sometimes an unfair judgment? So that's kind of what we're looking at. The one interesting thing that came out of that research and that story was the taxpayer money going to pay off lawsuits. This taxpayer money that's going to pay off lawsuits, including sexual harassment allegations. And so it's starting to come out that they're using your money, our money, to pay off sexual harassment claims, and that's something you're going to hit on later,
Definitely.
right?
I think Amber really nailed it right there. The big issue, and I know you at home are concerned, is transparency. How is my tax dollars being spent? I mean, we are taxed at a very high number. I'm sure when you get that paycheck in the mail, you're just frustrated and then get upset and angry when you learn exactly how that money is being spent, and quite frankly, it's not being spent in the right way.
Yeah. All right, well, that's the next wave of this story, I think, for sure. All right, so let's continue on as we go back to Capitol Hill. Jenna, what's coming up next from there?
Yeah, hey David. So we have Abigail Robertson, Capitol Hill correspondent. She's going to be joining me here talking about those sexual misconduct allegations and kind of the latest with those and just the atmosphere, the culture up here on the Hill. We'll be right back.
And the Middle East, center of the world for thousands of years, and still creating headlines that reach back to the Bible. Hosted by award-winning correspondent Chris Mitchell, Jerusalem Dateline brings a Christian perspective to events that literally change history. Whether it's the front lines or underground, Jerusalem Dateline is your window to Israel, Jerusalem, and the Middle East. Contact us at the address on your screen.
All right, well, welcome back to Faith Nation. We are here on Capitol Hill, and we're bringing you a special Capitol Hill focus show today, kind of what is happening, the very latest up here on the Hill, so be sure to keep it here with us. Coming up a little bit later in the show, we have a chat with the chaplain, Barry Black. It's a great interview. You don't want to miss that, so stay tuned for that. David?
That's right, Jenna. And also be sure to share this show. Please share this show. I'll pay you. No, I'm not going to pay you. I have no money. But go ahead and share the show on Facebook. And Jenna, we're going to check back with you in a second. But first, we want to bring in Ben over here. Ben over here, that's his last name. Welcome. Tell me more about these taxpayer payouts, basically. I mean, this is a big deal.
Well, David and Amber, this is definitely a huge deal, and it's really taken center stage on Capitol Hill. These sexual harassment lawsuits are being paid out by your tax dollars, and we're talking about millions of dollars here, millions of your hard-earned money. And the Office of Compliance that has just released some details. Here they are. Starting back in 1997, $15 million was paid out in settlements for sexual harassment, racial discrimination, and violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, what is not clear is exactly how much of this $15 million was paid out to sexual harassment cases. And remember, David and Amber, that this money was paid out using your tax dollars. And right now we're waiting to hear the names and the details. We got the numbers, $15 million, but exactly how much was paid out to each and everything is not clear. Also the names of the lawmakers involved. So we're waiting on those two things to happen. And you bet, when taxpayers, as ourselves, hear this news, it's hard not to get angry and upset. And in just a bit, our congressional correspondent, Abigail Robertson, will be having kind of the what's next factor, what lawmakers are doing now to not only stop this, but to make sure it never happens again.
Well, what a great transition, because it's time to go back out to Capitol Hill. Jenna Browder, co-host Faith Nation out there with Abigail Robertson on this issue. Jenna.
Yeah, hey guys, Abigail Robertson, like you said, joins me now. Hey, Abby.
Hello, hi.
Well, this is your beat. This is your specialty. You know, they were just talking about the taxpayer pay, you know, all of that. What's kind of your take on it? And I understand there's a new measure that
Yes.
would end this practice. Talk about that.
Yeah, so there is a bipartisan bill put forward to call for an end to these congressional hush funds. A lot of congressmen are saying taxpayers should definitely not be footing the bill for this. And since they have been for many years, it shouldn't be a secret. We should know what our money is going towards, and the lawmakers, their names should be out there. The details of what these settlements are should be out there. So they're calling for this just to completely stop and to retroactively find out what payouts have happened, who was involved, the details, and just have those people also pay back the U.S. Treasury for what they've benefited from.
Yeah. Of course, another issue you're following closely up here are all of the sexual misconduct allegations, and so many lawmakers facing these allegations with resignations left and right, what seems.
Yes.
What's the latest with that?
We have seen a lot of resignations this past week. We saw Senator Al Franken, Congressman Conyers, and then also Congressman Trent Franks, which was kind of more of a surprise because we found out that there was an issue there, and then he was gone within 24 hours, unlike the other two who sort of stayed a little bit to fight it. And I think the next big one to watch is Congressman Blake Farenthold, who Amber talked about. He is under an investigation, and we already know that he has benefited for $84,000, a settlement for a woman who claims that he sexually harassed her a couple of years ago. And so it is something that I think that we have not seen the end of these issues coming forward and the end of the resignations as a result of it.
Yeah. Well, you're up here every day walking Capitol Hill. Talk about the culture, the atmosphere. What's it like? Give us some insight.
So it's interesting. I've spoken to many staffers and staff members in different offices, and a lot of the staff members who work especially with strong Christian leaders have told me that this really isn't an issue for them, and that for years they've had things in place and open door policies with sexual harassment. So they just said, they obviously are praying about the issue and talking to their other members of the Hill about this, but it's not affecting all of the offices. So it's good to remember that not all congressmen and senators are bad people, or the staff, that there are offices that are okay and not being affected by this. But then there also are a lot of people who, I think there are a lot of victims who haven't come forward yet that we will see, because they maybe still work on the Hill and they're kind of weighing the pros and cons of voicing their opinion about this and telling their story, because there still is a lot that goes into that, and it can be a very stressful process for the victims. So this is definitely not the end. And then we're also seeing other things where there are false accusations coming forward. Like yesterday with Senator Chuck Schumer, there was somebody who was just fishing to different media outlets, a completely fabricated story, and luckily the woman who was named in that immediately came forward and said, this is totally false, this never happened, that she left Senator Schumer's office on nothing but good terms, and they were able to squash the whole thing. But that's another thing, is just the media. When we're reporting this, we have to be very careful. Luckily, the people who saw that report, they did their research, they got in contact with the people, and were able to quickly realize that it was not true. So the media have a responsibility to investigate what's coming forward, so to not just quickly assume that sexual harassment.
In our culture, when allegations can so quickly become indictments, it's a very serious
or trial
matter.
by media.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. All right, finally, Abby, some big news up here about tax reform.
Yes. So the Senate and House have agreed a compromise on a tax bill. So we will see this bill be sent back to both chambers. They're identical bills. Will have to be voted on by both of them, and those votes are set for next week. And I think that if they pass, it will be on the president's desk by Christmas, as they've been saying.
Like they've been saying. All right. Well, Abby, great job. You do
Great
such a
to have you
terrific job up here. I know, it's fun.
you.
This is fun. This doesn't happen very often.
No.
All right, we'll send it back to you guys.
Thanks, Jenna. Really boring for Abby on the Hill. Not much going on.
Yes, you're totally right.
Yeah, whatever. All right, thanks, ladies. Here we are, Ben and Amber. Amber, what do you got?
Oh yeah, you guys are definitely weighing in. Just jumping off of what the last couple things that Abby and Jenna said about the allegations. This one from Andrew, who said if he is guilty, he has to go, but prove it first. But then this one from Edward, who says the people of Alabama made the right decision. They made the God decision. You actually do reap what you sow. So a lot of different takes out there.
I don't know. There's a big look. The hashtag #MeToo movement. It is legitimate, all bold, all caps, 16 font. I will just simply say that it is a road that's interesting to go down when allegations are made. there are going to be so many candidates that potentially could have allegations made against them. And what happens then? Is that the end of their candidacy?
Well, yeah, that's kind of like what Abby was just saying with the Chuck Schumer incident.
Yeah.
Someone making a false accusation and Schumer immediately calling the police and saying, we're going to get to the bottom of this right now.
Right,
So it's going to be very interesting.
And that'll be the interesting take is going forward with the allegations. Were they true? We'll find out.
Sounds good.
But coming up on Faith Nation, lots more to talk about. We're about to meet a man whose job it is to share the gospel with our nation's leaders right on Capitol Hill.
I want it to be God. I want it to be Christ.
Hey there! Make sure you check out my new uplifting Christian entertainment show, Studio 5.
You know, I want to dress like Ephraim Graham, by the way. Jenna, you know, today we've been focusing on Capitol Hill, obviously allegations, you've got resignations and partisan fighting. You know, sometimes it can really seem like there isn't much hope on the Hill at all, Jenna.
Yeah, that's so true. But you know what? There are people working up here to change that. One of those people is Chaplain Barry Black. Jennifer Wishon, she sat down with them and brings us the story about how faith is present up here on Capitol Hill.
Here on Capitol Hill, Senate Chaplain Barry Black leads a flock of 7,000. He's pastor to all 100 U.S. senators, plus their staffs, counseling them, performing marriages, even funerals. He leads them in a weekly Bible study and is inside the Senate chamber with them, opening every session with prayer.
Give us more legislators who are not afraid to call sin by its right name.
I am an intercessor, and I am praying on behalf of the people I serve. These individuals are away from home, so even as there is a physician here in the Senate, because they can't go to their doctor back home, there's a pastor here in the Senate because they can't get to their pastor.
As Senate Chaplain, Black has an intimate understanding of the challenges, heavy decisions, and pressures facing senators. He offered this prayer recently, the day after 2 Republican senators traded political punches with President Donald Trump.
Lord, provide us with more patriots who will stand for right regardless of the consequences.
So I'm involved in their life. Ezekiel said, I sat where they sit, and I do. And my prayers reflect their aspirations, their dreams, their desires, the challenges that they are facing, the solutions that they want to the problems that they're grappling with.
You know, a lot of Americans feel like prayer is dead in the halls of power in America. They feel like God is not welcome in these halls. What do you say to those folks?
The idea that simply because people are involved in government, they do not have a connection with the transcendent, I think is a faulty one. Certainly, there are morally, spiritually, and ethically fit senators and staffers on Capitol Hill, and they believe in prayer. They fast and pray. There are some lawmakers who once were interested in pursuing the ministry. There are lawmakers with divinity school degrees who are ordained preachers. And there are lawmakers whose spirituality dwarfs my own.
For Black, it's a privilege to serve God and country. 14 years in the Senate and 27 in the Navy, where he rose to the rank of Rear Admiral.
Ephesians 6 says, put on the whole armor.
His command of the scriptures came early as his mother enticed Black and his siblings with 5 cents for every verse memorized.
So if you would enter our domicile, you would find my siblings and me searching the Word of God for short Bible verses. John 11:35, Jesus wept.
He gave his powerful testimony during a stirring speech at the biggest faith event in Washington. You really brought the house down at the National Prayer Breakfast this year.
Well,
The Holy Spirit brought the house down. My testimony is simply this: my hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest flame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. On Christ, the solid rock I stand. A lot of people were praying for me. 10 senators got together before I got up and said, let's pray for the chaplain. My wife basically told me, when she realized how much intercession was going on my behalf before I spoke, she said, there's no way that you could have bombed this time. So, you know, the wife keeps you humble.
He says what many Americans may not realize is there are hundreds of intercessors on Capitol Hill.
I get folk dropping by all the time, sometimes groups of individuals dropping by all the time, laying hands on me, praying for me. My staff knows that when a group comes in and when they leave, my bow tie is crooked. They know that I was worked over by that group, and they are here en masse to demonstrate to the forces of evil, you cannot win. Greater is he who is in us than he who is in the world.
And there is a history of having a chaplain appear on Capitol Hill. The Senate first elected its first chaplain back in 1789, so it goes way, way back. Faith definitely present here, despite all of the allegations of sexual misconduct that we see right now. David, back to you.
Well, Jenna, thanks. Thanks for anchoring from Capitol Hill this week. Hurry back. Get out of there quick. You know, it's toxic over there, you know, Jenna. It's toxic.
I know. I think I'll let Abby take this one.
All right, sounds good. Your seat is warm here. All right, thanks again. And by the way, James, here's why I said James. Barry Black reminds me of, let's face it, James Earl Jones.
Oh, my God.
Oh, with that voice?
He does have quite a voice. I just said that. I was like, hey, that was... just hearing him quote that last passage was pretty amazing.
Oh, yeah, I want that voice. I want him to read the Old Testament. I want that audio on tape. Yeah, audio book on tape. Barry Black with the greatest hits of Leviticus.
Real quick in the comments, people are turning to their faith. I want to point out Shay, Charlene, Debbie, Valerie. They all say, look, we need to pray. Thanks, guys, for commenting.
Yeah. Very nice. Are we done? Have I run out of scripts?
Well, I think what Ben just said was just a very poignant part to take away from the show. Today we talked about some really, really hard things our nation is dealing with. And as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with a word of encouragement. Sure. This is from John 16:33, where Jesus is talking to the disciples, and he says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. And I think that just kind of goes for this past year, whether it be the hurricanes or the mass shootings or the political upheaval that we've seen, that no matter what, Jesus has overcome the world.
That's right.
Yeah.
From Donald Trump to Roy Moore to hurricanes to everything.
To everything that's going on, at the end of the day, he has overcome. So.
That's right. He's overcome. He's on the throne. And that all translates into, ultimately, peace, inner peace, that we can have knowing that there's someone driving this ship. Because if it was us, it would be a train wreck.
Thank you guys so much for joining us this week and for watching. Be sure to join us next week right back here, right there on a new Faith Nation. You guys stay careful.